pressuring Russia as well to protect the issues of safety, to protect the issues of the consequences of the economy, of the environment that has been mentioned before as well. So there are some certain number of issues that we will continue working on, and we will try to prevent the things that has been, for example, yesterday voiced out during the meetings of the PPC meetings when Mr. Tolstoy, who is the representatives of the Russian Federation delegations in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, they've once again been claiming some really illegal claims about Crimea, once again referring to how strongly Russia violates the international law, how they do not acknowledge the occupation of Crimea of the Russian Federation on the international arena as well. So, of course, as the members of Parliament were searching for the legislative mechanisms as well in the framework of our internal policies, and we would like to collaborate further on and to support and advocacy in the development of this draft laws, and we're to continue to be advocating on the international arena as well. We're speaking against the violation of the human rights, against militarization of the peninsula, and we are supporting the liabilities of Russia for the actions that have been taken and the actions that will be taken further on. And basically, we're also speaking against the persecution of Crimean Tatars. I wanted to stop you for a second because, Amina has said about getting closer to some certain internal political things, for example, to have this joint Ukrainian position, and I wanted to ask you about that as well. On the zone of the free trade, what are the plans? When are we going to be discussing that? Where are you going to change the legislation? Is it planned for some certain session or not? And the issues that have been already voiced out as well, on the traditional justice, whether it's clear that something is planned for the spring session. And yes, I would like to say that the creation of the Crimean platform is going to bring us back to a more, let us put it this way, to a more responsible work of the committees and ministries, because basically I am the part of the international community that is mostly dealing with the issue of international advocacy, international support. Okay, thanks. So I think that I just wanted to mention as well that we have already the interfractional unity of the Crimean platform in December. Now we have a couple of dozens members of parliament participating in that, and in the consultations with the committees we have had a signal that all of the package for the draft laws on whether taking down some certain laws in the most recent times that will be considered. Thank you very much. Hennady, you are the head of the Civil Council in the framework of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. While I was getting ready to this conversation, I was reading different kind of initiatives from different Ukrainian organizations dealing with protection of the human rights and different issues of how to fulfill this Crimean platform in the right way. So there was a lot of things. What can we do with our international partners as well? Not only with the heads of the states, not only with the official representatives of government, on the further research, on what to let them know more of what is going on, not 7 years ago, but what is going on right now. So what are you doing right now? Do you hear the feedback? Did you feel the feedback? Did you hear any kind of understanding of what is the opinions of these initiatives right now? But what would be your advice? Let us put it this way, because you're also in the position to advise. Yes, thank you very much, Natalia. Well, I would like to start with saying that it's very important for us to say that there is outside the governmental level that really looks like, for the most, this is the diplomacy of the second level, and this diplomacy of the second level will give us the opportunity to track some ideas where the civil platform, the civil society and the government has the same vision. On the Crimean platform, I would like to say that there is a really big demand and interest in our international partners, and we do have the joint vision together with our partners from the governmental institutions on the topics and the resolution of the problems. So right you are by saying that 7 years have passed and there are many organizations who are dealing with the protection of the rights, ecology, safety, What is currently important for us, it's important for us to join the resources and the potential into the joint vision, joint approach that we will promote in the framework of the Crimean platform. There is the main direction in advocacy and in analytics. So in this case, we're not speaking about the complementarity of our analysis, but we're speaking on some certain thoughts that will help us to clarify certain thoughts for the government and to show our partners from abroad of how everything is being done. So this is the approach of pooling and sharing, that this is one of the main approaches that we're using right now. You have already said that there are many organizations and that there are many topics to be covered, and we have to know that is basically we have a joint vision of what the policy of the occupation is, what kind of tools should we use, and when we will have the civil direction to this issue. So I do believe that the first positive signal is that there is interest to that as well. The second moment is that the civil society joins that and they're ready to conduct the joint actions. And the third point is that we have the feedback and the connections with our colleagues from the government, because we have the interest to conduct the joint events, to have the forums, multilateral, bilateral forums, and to engage into this process. Before we get to the discussion, let us say a more discussion point and then to more details, I wanted to say that, well, we still have many different our ideas approach, so just for all the people to understand as well, that there are some certain ideas for preserving the identity of Crimea. There's a lot of ideas like that. The foundations to support young people, the issues of preserving the culture for the Crimean Tatar people. When we're speaking on the ecology, there is as well evaluation on the already actions that have influenced the environment or the investment support of Crimea or international monitoring. So I also wanted to fill it in, given some examples as well, because we will not be able to refer to that all of it. But basically, what can we say? What is the new and relevant? What is the new and relevant what is new in the 2 next years? Because basically we have to remind that more than 100 political prisoners are still being held in the prisons of Crimea. They have been taken to the Russian Federation. They all have children, and there's a critical situation in prisons right now, speaking on the pandemic of coronavirus. But there are new challenges. We all remember that, but we all keep on recalling that on the first political prisoners, on some certain issues connected to the torture and to the internally displaced peoples. Right now, we have the problem of militarization of the population, for example, drawing to the army. There is the problems not just with water, but with ecology overall, of what is happening with the water basins in Crimea and the serious violations of the ecological states in Crimea. There is the issues of pandemic, because for a year already the people have been blocked at the territories of Crimea. Now there is an issue of vaccination rising, that even if people would like to be vaccinated on the continental territory of Ukraine, then how can they do that? What is the new things that will not be lost in the overall informational sphere, like something that has already been said about Crimea? What are your priorities right now, speaking on the government, ministry, so on and on? In Ukraine, you mean like overall in Ukraine? Yes, like in informational space of Ukraine. So what do you currently emphasize on? So just not to say like Ukrainians are once again saying that the Crimea is occupied and one day it will be deoccupied. Speaking on Ukrainian space, and this is the question to the colleagues, because I can only comment about the international reaction. Well, I do believe that your question addresses both the internal and external things, because most of the violations that you had said that has happened for quite a long period of time already. Starting for example, drawing to the army, it has started in 2015. So this is a very big problem. This is, of course, the COVID-19 and everything that has been caused by the COVID pandemic, and it has been included for the international organizations as well, to the addresses for the Ukrainian and Ukrainian parliament, for example, on the most recent address by the parliament for Crimea, there is a very long explanation on the situation with COVID-19 in Crimea. So yes, of course, COVID-19 really influences our relations with the population that lives in Crimea. So this is basically, now we had already, so because of the pandemic of the COVID-19, we are paying additional attention to that. I do believe that in the first part of your question, there was a very important idea for that. We have to address our international partners with a menu, with a card, basically. What can we do on our own? What can we ask our international partners to do, to help us do it? Because I believe that Amina and us and all of the colleagues, when we're meeting all of our colleagues, they all say that we're ready to help, because everyone understands that Crimea is Ukraine. There's no other position about that. But what they waiting for is that they're waiting what they want. They want ideas, and that can be something really small and something really good. And basically, I do believe that one of our ideas, what we should do, is building up of these menus. And you have mentioned some of the projects that can be worked on. Just to say for us that we're going to take care of that internally. For example, the strategy of the occupation and reintegration of Crimea. That's our homework. That's something that we can do and only we can do. But there are some things that we will be really happy for the support of our international partners. Okay, so I will get into as well by commenting these specific ideas for our partners where we can be able to implement some specific things. All of this, when we have different architecture for our next assemblies of the parliament, the experts, every single dimension should find their own ways to be working on that. And our case is to find the pool of the projects. So there is still some certain framework in how we have had this idea from the very beginning. Like, for example, we already have the experts and organizations that have been only working with these topics. And basically, if we will be working on how this help is being provided, either by in Donbass and the reforms and corruptions issues, the issues of Crimea, that hasn't been in the top of our attention for the donors' money as well. And our idea was to create this kind of idea for the people who believe working with the topic of Crimea to have the constant finances available. Because like this is about speaking of what can be done, though this is what it is. So we are creating the associations of experts. It will be basically inclusive, and all the people who would like to work on that, they will be able to be working on that. And we are going to be providing these associations altogether. For these foundations, we have the reputation, the history, and the capacities to manage certain projects that we will going to provide the money for this foundation, and then we will provide the work for the international expert community, the research, the recommendations for the community that will be covering the highest dimensions for the parliament and the government, the expert diplomacy, just to get the topic of Crimea outside of Kiev into outside of our internal discussion to the broadest scope possible. So getting the expert democracy, when we're going to be collaborating with the think tanks and experts on the international and global level in order for us to stimulate the biggest number of publications and for us to get it wider, to get it louder. Why do we need to do that? I usually hear the skepticism that it's all declaration, there's only conversations, nothing more, but a very specific example, and I am recalling this case frequently because a couple of months ago I had a telephone conversation with Ivan Komendivadev, who have been imprisoned for 3 years. He's a journalist. He made a video on Islam. After he has been freed, and we have spoken on the telephone with him, he has thanked to all of people who have kept his case public, because that was the only argument why he wasn't tortured, because it was public reaction to this case. So for us, it is very important to keep on this topic of Crimea publicly, because it's not a secret for you, Natalia, or for everyone who's here, that the Russian Federation, they have the huge political, diplomatical, and financial, economical resource for people not to speak of Crimea. So the Crimean platform should get Crimea to a different dimension and to a different loudspeaker, let's put it this way. Yes, I have a question to Hennady, but right now we are having this anniversary of the resistance to Crimea. Then we will have this anniversary of the so-called referendum, and the international political institutions, they have some certain conversations and discussions about that. And I see how they struggle with looking for the topics, because it's really hard for them to be talking on the same thing every year. And I mentioned some topics with the COVID-19 and with the ecology, with environment, and also with Crimea being overpopulated, because the citizens of Russia have been repopulated in Crimea. It also influences the overall construction and the environmental issues there. Do you see that there is the demand for the new knowledge, for the new information on something that is going on right now, but not just reflecting on the first years of occupation? And what would you as well tell to those colleagues who might be the advocates and the lawyers of Ukraine in the international space. I would divide it into two. First of all, the Carthage has to fall. The main idea is that we have to have these policies of deoccupations, of unacknowledgements, maybe that might even sound very narrow for some circles. We have to keep on working with this rock. The other issues that we are speaking of the idea that can be visionary, and even in our collective, expert collective, we're always saying, why should not we get to this idea of how do we see Crimea after the deoccupation? And this vision we can discuss with our colleagues. And we should speak that there are different audiences and different countries, and maybe for every single country there might be different ideas that we'll be addressing. Somewhere the ecology will be working better, somewhere the militarization and how to fight the militarization will be better. The issues of preventing the nuclear weapons being uploaded there, they will be very important. I think, like, for example, for our American partners, they're more interested in the issues of safety in this format. They're interested in the nuclear weapons more. They're interested into all of the other things, like, for example, what's going on with the army. Speaking with our French colleagues, we need to find the other approaches that will be more or less clearer for them, because it's harder to work with them and there's a different understanding there. But okay, the universal issue of environment that can get engaged all the other countries that have been abstaining from the issues of security. Okay, Igor, in the Ministry of the Reintegration, what would you expect now? I will just maybe give you an idea, or will add up to this idea. Of course, the pandemic influences everyone. Whoever you talk to right now abroad, they feel that there is a certain problem. There is a big question right now because of all of the issues. Can you please explain us? A lot of Ukrainians have no understanding what is going on with the trespassing of the checkpoints right now. What can you do? How can we help? What kind of help and aid do you need right now? Well, first of all, speaking on the international component, we are continuing working. Even in the framework of COVID, we're still working with our international partners. And, for example, the Vice Prime Minister Reznikov, he is continuing to conduct the visits and discussing the issues of Crimea. They're continuing mentioning that even though to the stories that Russia has been promoting for the last 7 years, that the issues of Crimea is closed, that's not an issue that has been closed for us. It is absolutely equally a priority as the issues of Donbass is, and we're trying to connect it still. So for 7 years, this issue has been separated mostly. Most of the people only covered the issue of Donbass, and let us be honest, there was a little bit of distant treatment of the Crimean issues. After the ministry has been re-established, even inside of our framework of the structure of the ministry, we have built a very different structures inside of the ministry. We have taken down out the geographical principle of work of the ministries, but we go to the function. There is a directorate that's dealing with all of the temporarily occupied territories. So that is why that has been very important for us. When we have been speaking about the situation in the peninsula, speaking about the trespassing of the checkpoints, and Anton is right about that. If in 2019 we have seen that has been 12 million trespassing through the checkpoints with Ukraine, then the last year, starting from March, when the quarantine has been announced, then of course the trespassing at the checkpoints has only been 500,000 trespassings a year. And this is a big problem because the Russian Federation limits the opportunity to trespass the checkpoints to just once a year. It has been written down in their governmental decree, and unfortunately here it is very hard for us to influence Russia. We can only influence Russia through our international partners. So that is why the platform is highly needed. It is the tool for us, not only as a kind of a research tool, it's a practical tool in how we're going to be building our international position. And this is the tool of influence to the Russian Federation. The sanctions as well, the policy of unacknowledgement, the specific action that the specific countries are taking. It's not just the presentations in the international organizations overall. This is about working with businesses so that businesses will not be working with Russia. So it's just the same. We do support the idea of taking down the free economical zone. This is a total nonsense because we are requiring from the rest of the world not to work there, but we have this regime of facilitated economical activities there. So basically, we consider this platform as a very important tool for us. But once again, I would like to say that as a ministry, we get into this platform with a specific offer, and it is very important for all of us. We have to discuss what's going to happen after the deoccupation, and we have to explain to the people what to expect, because if people do not know what to expect, they are no more ready to this occupation as well. So we have to be very clear with that, and we have to say that the deoccupation, the restoration of the control over Crimea is not about territory, it's about people, and we're working on that. So yes, just to finalize our discussion, I just wanted to say that yes, we know that there will be the launch for the 23rd of August, and there will be more conversations about that as well. But in the short-term perspective, in a month, there's not a lot of things that you can do in a month, but I would like to ask for each of you to speak up. In this case, in the Parliament of Ukraine or in the interactive platforms, what is being planned in these directions? What do you plan to do for the next months? I'm going to ask each one of you, even though that I know that, Nadia, you're not a public official, Nadia, you can actually give us an advice. Marina? I will give you the feedback from something that has already been discussed by our colleagues, because basically Crimea has a huge potential to gain support in the international arena, because this topic of Ukraine and occupation and annexion, not for it to be tiresome. Ukraine has to be considered in the international arena as the state that managed to do good, and every reform provides additional motivation for the international community to keep supporting us. The second thing is once again promoting the Crimean culture in the world. And again, providing the events, Ukrainian Crimea and Germany, Ukrainian Crimea and Belgium, informational policy when we're basically telling what Crimea is, what kind of bonuses Berlin or Brussels can receive when Crimea is going to be Ukrainian, when it's going to be free of the annexation. So Crimea is an important part of Ukraine, and I've been a couple of times. I've been to Crimea, and this is unbelievable, picturesque place. It is. I can't even find the words to describe it. But this is definitely an unbelievable part of Ukraine that not a lot of people knows about. And maybe when people talking about Crimea, they don't even know what is inside of this annexed Crimea. So that is why we have to promote the Crimean Tatar culture, to keep on talking about the people, imprisoned people, about their families. How do people deal with that when their families and brothers and sisters have been held up captives in Crimea for 7 years? What is their point of view to life? What are they facing right now? So basically, there is a huge field of projects for your Crimea platform. There's something that you can work on when you're telling about Crimea in the world. Speaking in our closest activity, we're going to be implementing the work in an interfactual community in the Parliament, so that it will be a very effective place when we're going to have all of the project initiatives discussed. We will continue in uniting the world and the parliamentaries around the Crimean platform, so all of the members of this platform have been conducted by the deputies of the world. So, Hennady, you cannot bear responsibility because you're not a state official, but still, your advice, what can be done at this stage? Well, I believe there are certain mechanisms of collaboration have already been developed, and we are ready to get back to this decisions that are politically oriented. As Amina has said, there are some certain recommendations that we have to do from our own experience and our own work, but there are two moments that we can do. We are free in our movement, but we have to have the track of how we're going to be working on. How are we going to be collaborating with our partners abroad? That is a big challenge for us as the community overall. Well, we have a couple of plans for this month, a couple of tracks that we're following, and I can speak about that for quite a long period of time. We have this track on supporting the Crimean Tatar language and the development of Crimean Tatar language and the concept that we're working for. And we, of course, have the project on the indigenous people. This is the project that we're going to be ending up in the recent times, and we're going to present it soon. We have the plan on constructing some additional checkpoints, and we're going to be updating the Chonga checkpoint when we have the direction that my colleagues is working on, and I think she's going to be telling you more on provision, the help for these checkpoints, and for example, conducting the testings for COVID. We have a sanction direction that we're also working on, and we're going to provide some new offers on sanctions. Right now it's being internally updated, so that's basically that we can do it throughout the months. I can tell you many more things to do that. Okay, the constant representatives of the President of Ukraine, this is something that is basically an important issue for you, but what is your main task right now? Well, right now I believe that the most important, if you're speaking about, if it's about the issue for what we're going to be doing next month, then I think that we should show the overall capability and the opportunities for the people to be working in the overall tracks. That today's address of the President, today's issues that the President has issued, those are the very important issues that the people are understanding that Crimea is on Ukrainian agenda, because for the people who are going to come to Crimean summit, it's important for them to see that Ukraine does a lot of things inside of Ukraine, for Ukraine. If we had the strategy for the deoccupation of Crimea and the Sevastopol, the city of Sevastopol, that would have been a very powerful method. So yeah, this is basically the public policy statement that we have. That would be a very powerful statement for our international partner, that we will be basically working on that. And we also believe that right now in the Office of the President there is the concept of the protection of the human rights in the conditions of the violent, in the armed conflict on the territory of Ukraine, or the so-called transitional justice theory. If our partners will see that there is a corresponding order of the President has been issued, then it will be a very powerful message for them as well. And I do believe that, in a month this will be hard for us to do because we still have the COVID-19 pandemic. But if till the time of when the Crimean platform will begin, we will be able to activate our international platforms to get their visiting the checkpoints, because it have never been done before, because when we had already the ambassadors of the UK, of Canada, of Lithuania and Latvia visiting the checkpoints over there. If we will continue with this project and if we will engage them more, then that will be very good for us, because we have this short goal for us, because this is something that is very important for us as well. We really want to get the strategy of work of our institution for 3 years, because we believe that this is as well a good indicator that the state bodies understand how they should be working under condition of temporary occupation. We will support that as well. Okay, Amina, you're just beginning to do that. We have a clear plan. So first of all, there is a summit. We're going to be continuing working on the invitations and the chapter that is going to be signed there. We have already provided these elements of those charters for the core group countries, the 20 countries, and this is an everyday track of the everyday work for all of our institutions. On the 3rd of March, we're going to have an event, a closed event in the Diplomatic Academy. We're going to be sharing the information on the strategy of the deoccupation and what is going to be the Crimean platform overall and what we can do. Then there's going to be the protection of our population, the material aid that we can provide. There has been more than 200 cases when we have provided the support and help. Then was because of the 200 lawyers have been provided the opportunity to protect the people on the other side of occupation, and we're going to continue in this track. Our political prisoners are going to be supported. We're going to launch the international project of mentorship. We're going to emphasize the cases and to light up those stories that the occupation is not just the story of the specific people, but we have the 8 civil journalists working in this mentorship project, the courts, International Marine Tribunal, and we're going to be working on this track as well. Then the sanctions. We've had already together with the Prosecutor's Office of the Crimea. We had already the list of the 10 violators, and the European Union is going to consider that in the EU global sanctions mechanism. That's a new mechanism that hasn't been existing before. For all of the 7 years as a country, we have been saying that the violations of the law, we didn't have any kind of pressure mechanism, and now the European Union has provided this mechanism. There will be the first sanctions on Alexei Navalny, the personal sanctions, the banning from entrance, and banning and freezing up all of the accounts. We believe that we would like to be the parts of that as well. We are pressuring, but we are promoting the idea of launching the special representative of Crimea in the European Union, and we are on this consultants as well. The final case on sanctions, we have been working together with Vice Prime Minister Reznikov, and we have worked it with Nicaragua. We have this consulate in Nicaragua, and it was an important case for us. The trade embargo for all of the Ukraine, that has been the first time that Ukraine has provided the embargo and the limitations of trade, that was because of the Nicaraguan case. On the international informational campaigns, we are launching currently, and I do believe we're launching a very important campaign that is called Crime, when we are skipping Crimea but without the A later. It has to be different dimensional, it has to include different people, and we had the manifesto and all the people who believe that this is the crime in Crimea and the person has to be punished, and you can join this manifesto, but you will see that in the social media. Thank you very much. So, our task as journalists is going to be to remind you of all of those things, to understand if something is postponed, to be provided the clear information. That was the conversation on the Crimean platform as a tool. We had Emina Japarova, the first deputy of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Anton Koronevich, the constant representative of President of Ukraine in Autonomous Republic of Crimea, the deputy minister of the temporarily occupied territory, Marina Bardina, the members of parliament from the Servant of People political party, and Hennady Maksak, the head of the Civil Council in the framework of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, and the head of the Ukrainian Prisma, the Council for Foreign Policies. My name is Natalia Humaniuk, and we'll get back to you in 10 minutes in order to discuss the things that are really painful and sensitive for many people, the reintegration and the return of the people from the temporarily occupied territory of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. We're going to be speaking on very specific and practical things of what can be done and what is done, and what are the issues voiced out for the Ukrainian representatives of state. So get back to us in 10 minutes.
із пріоритетних напрямів держави з початку російської агресії проти України є збереження життя і здоров'я дітей, які проживали або проживають на тимчасово окупованій території України, та забезпечення їх права на освіту. Для забезпечення шкільної освіти дітей, які проживають на тимчасово окупованій території або виїхали з неї, здійснено ряд заходів, а саме спрощення процедури їх зарахування до закладів загальної середньої освіти, зокрема, шляхом подання документів засобами електронного зв'язку. Також забезпечено можливості для випускників шкіл з тимчасово окупованих територій завершити навчання на підконтрольній території та отримати документи про освіту державного зразка. Забезпечено можливості протягом 1 року пройти атестацію на курсах базової та профільної середньої освіти, а також створено умови для самостійного навчання відповідно до державного стандарту за допомогою платформи змішаного навчання учнів 5-11 класів «Всеукраїнська школа онлайн». У зв'язку з збільшенням кількості освітніх центрів збільшено обсяги квоти 2 до 12 755 місць. У 2019 році така квота становила понад 3600 місць. До роботи щодо прийому осіб з тимчасово окупованих територій за спрощеною процедурою вперше приєдналися всі заклади вищої освіти, які знаходяться в сфері управління Міністерства охорони здоров'я, 14 університетів, які знаходяться в сфері управління Мінкульта, та 3 університети від Міністерства внутрішніх справ. В межах реалізації ініціативи президента України Володимира Зеленського щодо сприяння молоді з тимчасово окупованих територій України при вступі до закладів вищої освіти, Міністерство освіти і науки запровадило пілотний проект безоплатних підготовчих курсів для дітей з тимчасово окупованих територій. Ми прагнемо залучити якомога більше дітей, які завершили навчання в закладах загальної середньої освіти на тимчасово окупованій території після квітня 2014 року. Пілотний проект діятиме впродовж 2021-2022 років у 9 закладах вищої освіти. В цих університетах розташовані освітні центри Донбас Україна, Крим Україна, які допомагатимуть вступникам з тимчасово окупованих територій подавати необхідні документи для навчання на підготовчих курсах. Заклади вищої освіти мають сприяти на період навчання забезпеченню слухачів підготовчих курсів місцями в гуртожитку. Набір на курси вже розпочався. Навчання відбуватиметься за очною, змішаною або дистанційною формами.
– 26 лютого чергова річниця кримського спротиву проти окупації Російською Федерацією півострову Крим. Саме у минулому році було завершено процес встановлення та повідомлення про підозри окупаційним слідчим, прокурорам та суддям, загалом 28 особам, які причетні до незаконного кримінального переслідування учасників проукраїнського мітингу 26 лютого 2014 року біля Верховної Ради Криму. Ми проводимо системну роботу з метою встановлення морських та повітряних суден, які попри заборону порушують порядок в'їзду та виїзду на окупований півострів. Загалом вже встановлено 500 таких літаків російських авіакомпаній та більш ніж 600 морських суден. За клопотанням прокуратури автономії накладено арешти на 190 літаків і 50 суден-порушників. Пріоритетом в нашій роботі залишається саме розслідування воєнних злочинів, вчинених Російською Федерацією та її окупаційною адміністрацією на території півострова. Докази, отримані у ході розслідування кримінальних проваджень, лягають в основу повідомлень до Офісу прокурора Міжнародного кримінального суду. Для нас важлива комунікація з кримчанами. Зокрема, ми використовуємо соціальні мережі для роз'яснення кримчанам дій та рішень окупаційної влади, що порушують норми міжнародного гуманітарного права. Для забезпечення безпеки кримчани мають можливість анонімно звернутися до прокуратури автономії з заявами про вчинення злочинів через засоби інтернет-зв'язку. Таким чином, прокуратура автономії надалі продовжує роботу для захисту прав і свобод громадян України на тимчасово окупованій території півострова Крим.
Крим – це Україна. У цьому переконаний весь цивілізований світ. Під знаменами незалежної України в Криму народилося і виросло ціле покоління українців. На жаль, загарбницькі плани Російської Федерації щодо півострову почалися задовго до 2014 року, а саме з моменту набуття українською державою незалежності. Росія не могла пробачити собі розвал імперії у будь-яких її формах. Провалився бліцкриг по захопленню Криму, У 90-ті, завдяки вдалим діям української влади, спецслужб, правоохоронців, вдалося зберегти територіальну цілісність нашої держави. У 2017 році мала статися визначна подія – вивід російського військово-морського флоту з території півострова. Тому у 2014 році Кремль пішов ва-банк. Нехтуючи міжнародним правом, вторгся своїми військами до Криму і фактично захопив його. З того часу Росія тримає у заручниках наших громадян в Криму. Вірю, що настане час, коли усі, хто вимушено покинули свої оселі, повернуться додому. Вдячна кримчанам, які з вірою в Україну стали на захист нашої держави на Сході. Слава Україні та її захисникам!
We're welcoming you back at the TV marathon on the day of the resistance against the occupation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. It is being held on the Dom television channel and, of course, will be broadcasted with the help of our partners, the Chornomorska television company, Radio NV, Ukrainian Pravda, and the Hromadske Television. And, of course, we are really grateful to all of Ukrainian journalists and media platforms that are reminding us today on the platform, on the problems that exist, on the resolution it might have, and who are honoring the people who have been protecting Crimea and Ukraine, who keep on fighting, who keep on struggling, who keep on living under the occupation. We're honoring these people and now commemorating these people. And our third final discussion, we're going to be speaking on the reintegration of the Crimea and the return of the people from the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea instead of the Sevastopol. And we're going to be speaking about that as well, summing up the year when all of the world and the people who have lived through occupation, who have already had the experience of the pandemic, of the world pandemic, which really made any kind of aid challenging and difficult and really ravaged to the vulnerable groups. It has been the certain limitations on movement overall. There was some certain limitation provided by the occupational government of Russia in Crimea, and so it's hard time for us to mention of what can we do, what should we do, what has to be changed, because it's not just the usual problems of occupation. We have some new challenges to cover as well, and we really want to know what can be done, what has been changed or maybe not in the state policy of the reintegration in the recent year. We're going to be speaking on the access to education, state services. What are the challenges? What are the challenges and tasks in protecting the Crimean Tatar people? So we have invited Tamila Tasheva, the deputy of the constant representatives of the President of Ukraine in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, Inna Dragonchuk, the deputy of the Ministry of the Reintegration of the Temporarily Occupied Territory, Olha Kureshko, the lawyer and co-coordinator of the Crim SOS organization, Ulsana Emediyeva, the head of the Directorate of the Ministry of the Digital Transformation, and Taras Shevchenko, the Deputy Minister of Culture and Informational Policy of Ukraine. My name is Natalia Humenyuk. So I'm going to be directing the first question, I guess, to Tamila Tasheva, because we're speaking about the new challenges. Can you give us an outline what kind of the new challenges you have seen throughout the last year, and what are the challenges that are the most relevant, and how we will resolve that? Who will be those who will help you to resolve those issues, except for, like, we do understand that your representative of the President of Ukraine doesn't do that on your own, so we need collaboration with other bodies. Yes, well, I know that I will start the first that the policy of the state and the occupied territories in the recent time has changed significantly. We have changed this approach from the constant discriminational notions to the people in the occupied territories, to overcoming those mistakes that we've had. And so right now we are working on the change of the legislation on the free economical zone. We're working on the legislation that is now dealing with issues of the administrative services for the people living in Crimea. We are changing the approaches that are working with these issues of provision of the medical and educational services, so on and so forth. So, of course, for us as for the state and for us as the team of the president, the team of the representative of the president, is the key moment that we're not only returning the territory, but we're returning the people. And this connection with our population who are currently living in the occupied territory is the key moments for us of what has to be done. Because 7 years after the start of the occupation and the armed aggression of the Russian Federation, we have lost some certain connections. So answering your question, Natalia, I would like to say that, yes, of course, there are many challenges to be coping with, because there are a lot of limitations that have been imposed by the Russian Federation. For example, this one-time entrance and entrance to the temporarily occupied territory. For example, last year, the President of Ukraine has signed a law that gives the opportunity for the children from the temporarily occupied territories to enroll to any educational establishment, on the territory that is under Ukrainian governmental control without the external independent evaluation. But we only had around 600 children that enrolled to our educational establishments. Why? Because there were some certain limitations from the side of the Russian Federation. The children were not able to come to enroll because they have already used this one opportunity that they had a year. So those are the big challenges that we're currently facing. On the other hand, we understand there were some certain limitations from the side of the government for the people of the temporarily occupied territories on entering and leaving those territories. But the government of Ukraine is responding to the need and the demand of our people, to understanding the challenges that we have. We're starting to work on those mistakes that we have done, so on those challenges and limitations. So we had some certain amendments to this decree that give the opportunity for the people from the occupied territories and the children from the occupied territories to come to the governmentally controlled territories. So now there's no limitations for visiting the continental Ukraine or Crimea from the side of Ukrainian state, from the side of Ukrainian government they are taken down. As a representative of the presidential office, we have worked for more than 6,000 addresses of the people of Ukraine. They were mostly addressing for the opportunity to be provided with the certain services. We believe that it is very important to provide the services of medical costs for the people and the population living in the occupation. So we have already started the vaccination of the population in Ukraine, and we believe that the people of the temporarily occupied territories, they should be able to be vaccinated with those vaccines that have been officially provided for Ukraine. Those are the additional issues of the online services. Together with the Ministry of Reintegration, together with the Ministry of the Digital Transformation, we have started to establish those services, and I do believe that Ruslan is going to tell you more about that. So what is important, what is being expected from Ukrainian state by our Ukrainian citizens? The simplification of the services provided and the simplification of the provision of the services. So we would not get into the situation when the National Bank of Ukraine is providing a decree by the National Bank of Ukraine that any member who currently lives at a temporarily occupied territory, they can receive the banking services, they can obtain a bank card and they be serviced in the bank, but some separate banks are not following this decree by the National Bank, and they're providing some additional informational work to do that, for example, with the Ukrainian banks, that the situation should not happen further on. So once again, I would like to say that the pandemic has provided a lot of challenges to this state. Yes, right you are. But there are many challenges that have started from 2014. For the certain time, they haven't been resolved. And for the recent year and a half, we have been trying to come up with those things that haven't been done before. We're trying to cover those up. Inna, can you please tell us of what has been going on with the overall testings and with the vaccination, how those plans can be fulfilled? Of course, we understand altogether there are some certain, a little bit of element of propaganda to that. We know that Russia is now participating in the overall fight over vaccines. There is the way for us to show that, yes, of course, we're going to be helping Crimean people with that, or we're going to start the vaccination with them much earlier before any kind of testings of their vaccine is going to be ended up. So what kind of activities of Ukraine might show that right now when the crisis is there, then Ukraine is going to be the first country to help? But unfortunately, if we will be speaking from the outside, there's nothing that we've seen about that, because if there was an issue of how to help Kiev or Chernivtsi, no one has even spoken about the temporarily occupied territories, even though we had some problems and have conversations of that. What are the challenges and problems right now, for example, in the healthcare sphere? Well, I do agree that all of the tasks that has been set out from the very beginning, the overcoming of the pandemic, we haven't reached them all. That is fact, and we only can say that any kind of tryout for the state to come closer to this medical services provision on the temporarily occupied territories, they have only been fulfilled partly. You know that throughout last year we have started trying to provide the medical services and provided the services zones that were open at the checkpoints. So this is the very first time that the representatives of the state, of the representatives of the medical sectors, have been coming to the contact line to provide the medical services. Thus, we have the algorithm that has been developed together with the Ministry of Healthcare. When we had provided the testings there, it has been done in Donetsk and Kherson regions, but it hasn't started yet in Lugansk region yet. So this is a very important message that we should provide to our citizens, that we should show that any kind of informational policies or strategies that should be built on them, certain different actions. So right now, factually, we have 60, 70 testings that have been provided in Donetsk region. In Kherson, for the 3 days, we had a little bit of breakage, but yesterday we had around 70, 60, 70 testings on a daily basis. So in the recent 3 weeks, we have been working together with our colleagues from the Ministry of Healthcare in order to develop the algorithm for the vaccinations for our population. But the first thing that we have started with a collaboration from the side of our ministries, speaking about the synchronized process between all of the stakeholders that are participating in that. We know that we have already started the surveys for the people who crossing the check lines, for crossing the contact line, for their readiness to be vaccinated, just for us to recalculate the amount of vaccines. And we're speaking about Kherson, Donetsk, and Lugansk regions right now. So our main vision here is that we are going to be either making the online queue together with our colleagues from the Ministry of Digital Transformation. We're working on that as well. So whether our people will be able to sign in through the DIA application or through the hotline. Those are the two main methods how we can provide it, because the issues of vaccination is a very important issue. It's not a technical issue for that. They cannot be stored for them certain period because of the main indicators. There is going to be a much more complex process to be organized, but we see how it can be organized. I have a question to Gulsana Mammadeva, and I would like to ask you as the representatives of the Ministry of Digital Transformation. This year has shown that many things that we should go on foot, go personally. Now a lot of things that can be done online. That this is the task for the Ministry of Digital Transformation, and this is the story with Crimea. That many things could never be done because it's temporarily occupied territory. It has been cut out from the state. But right now the state creates the mechanisms, like for example the online education is quite possible. Most of the people are communicating with their doctors online mostly. They're not going for the physical visits to the hospitals. And there's no big difference of whether you're calling Kiev to Kiev from Jankoy to Kiev, or from one district of Kiev to another district. How are you going to be using this opportunity of finally providing the services that hasn't been provided to the Ukrainian population in Crimea for over the 7 years, just with the explanation that the territory is cut out from the services? What kind of limitations there can be? What can we do in the fastest pace? Yes, thank you very much for this question. It's a very important question, so I will try to briefly cover up this question as well. So right now we have the digital transformation of Ukraine overall, how the Ukrainians collaborate with the state institutions, how they can be provided with the state services, so on and so forth. This is the process of the re-engineering of everything that has been done before. Those are the processes that have been held. There are some peculiarities for these processes for the temporarily occupied territories. First of all, the identification. It is really hard to identify people there. We're now working on the remote identification. Basically, we have the e-signature, mobile ID, and bank ID, so types of identification. They cannot work in Crimea, for example, mobile ID, because the mobile phones of Ukrainian operators do not work in Ukraine. We're working in the Ministry of Digital Transformation on the DIA ID project, which will be the e-signature in your smartphone that you will be using by just pressing one button. And so basically then you can have your e-ID with that. So when you have this DIA ID only once, you will be able to receive the access to all of the services that are available at the DIA portal. This is one of the elements of how this transformation of the digital landscape is being done, and how we're going to restore the digital connection. Yes, of course, there are many problems. So basically, there are many problems for the people from the occupied territories that we're currently working on. What are the tops of those problems? What are those problems? Oh, those are constantly changing problems. Okay. The first is the registration of birth and registration of death. I can tell you more about the e-baby, how this case is going to be working for the people from the occupied territory. The e-baby engages 3 different services with one application. So, for example, when the child is born, you will only need 20 minutes to fill in all of the application forms in the DIA portal and the registration registration is finalized. For the occupied, temporarily occupied territories, it will work under the decisions of the court. The next step will be get into the e-court, so you will not be able to, you will not have to apply any kind of the offline actions. It requires a different point of view for the service and considering the peculiarities for the occupied territories, and every service should be considered like that. We are speaking on the automation of the compensation for the destroyed housing or the residential housing. We are working on providing the access to the temporarily residential housing. So there are numbers of services that we're currently working on, but we have to understand that the main basis for that is identification. And when we will reserve these issues with technology-wise, so when we will have these virtual mobile numbers, it will be then much possible for all of us to speak about the increasing numbers of the e-services that will be available for our population everyday basis. Okay, I would like to have the question on whether it really works. I would like to ask Taras Shevchenko, the Deputy Minister of Informational Policy and Culture of Ukraine. So the story with Crimea was like that. We have to deal with Russian propaganda, and I do believe that this thesis doesn't involve any doubts, but right now we have a different thing. If something doesn't work in truth, though, it's really hard for the people in Ukraine or in the occupied territories to explain people that everything is good or no. So, they have to protest, they have to resist, even though that we do not understand whether they have real problems or not. So I would like to really know right now, what is the main direction right now for what the Ministry of Culture and Informational Policy does right now? The Minister has mentioned on creating the Center of the misinformation, whether it will be referring to Crimea as well. The second issue is what can be done to support the Crimean Tatar people and Crimean Tatar culture and the ethnical understanding. And what can the key issues when we're speaking of some certain services that are provided? Many people in Crimea and in the occupied territories, they have no idea that this kind of services are available. What do you plan? What will be done so that the people would learn that those services are available? Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. The topic sounds the informational reintegration of Crimea. The couple of ministries working on that, and currently for most of the issues, they have been provided to the Ministry of the Reintegration. And basically the work of the Dom television channel and the support of the broadcasting for the temporarily occupied territories on behalf of the Ministry of Culture and Informational Policy, we have already provided this to the control of the Ministry of the Reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories. It still is a joint topic for all of us, even more right now on the more systematic level. Our ministry, together with all of the other ministries, is working on the strategy of informational security that will as well include these topics. And when we're going deeper on some lower levels, then we can see that there are many different measures that are being held by many different ministries in our ministry as well. For example, right now we have started implementation of the project that is called the Platform on Learning Crimean Tatar Language. It has been selected at our artistic competition last year and is going to be implemented this year because of in a couple of months this platform is going to be created. The very same thing, the same issue in the context of the misinformation, media literacy, critical thinking. Those are the topics mostly concerning everyone, because it's hard for us to say that misinformation is only about Crimea or only about Donbass or only about basically Kiev or the Transcarpathian region. That the misinformation, the fakes, they influence the situation all over the country, and it mostly influences the regions where the situation is the hardest. So, of course, the day of resistance against occupation is an important date in bringing up the truth, in raising the question once again on the political and international level, getting it back to the agenda. So the tools that what has been offered by our ministries and what the Minister of Culture and Informational Policy has announced, so creating the Center of Counteraction towards Misinformation, this is going to be the institution that will identify, research, response, and what is the most important issue, will provide the systematic response to the misinformation provided. This misinformation and fakes should not be debunked simply. We believe that it would have been a simplification that you can just debunk all of the fake news, and in that way we would be constantly only following up and will be never able to keep up with that. It is important for us to have the good capacity for the state to communicate of what the government is doing. The governmental communications are slightly simpler to be provided on the territory that are under governmental control. It is harder for the territories that are not under governmental control. And in this understanding, it is very important for us to have the middle waves broadcasting for our public broadcasting company. It gives the opportunity for the people who would like to listen to Ukrainian radio on the occupied territory to turn the radio on and to be able to listen to the midwaves. Except for the strategic communication and governmental communications, we believe that our main force, our main strong point is the freedom of speech as well. The pluralism, the free opportunities for working for the different media, the multiple opinions that can be critical, that may not be not that critical, but this is something that is very different from our northern neighbor. And I believe that democracy is a very good side of Ukraine, the strong side of Ukraine that will give us the opportunity to keep on developing, to be resilient for all of the threats that we have. And on behalf of our ministry and from the point of view of our ministry, we are providing the freedom of speech and providing the communication for the state. So thus we will have no more space for misinformation and fake news. Yes, I think I would like to address Olha Kuleshko, who is the co-coordinator of the NGO Crimea SOS. We have already heard that basically we had this opportunity for most of our representatives to speak of what has been done, but how it's going to be done really. And so basically, what are the questions that are left off? What works, what not? So what are the addresses? What are the demands of the people? What kind of problems you see? And this is the problems how you can address the representatives of the government, and you can receive some answers or comments, or maybe just draw the attention that maybe something does not really work. Well, for us as the NGO, we have this opportunity of talking directly to people. We have the hotline, we have the direct consultancy offers. And in the recent times, the top questions was about the going through the checkpoints. There was the issues of achieving the passport of Ukraine, an ID of Ukraine. There was already receiving the documents that have already been ordered, and this is a very good example of effective communication between the people from the occupied territories and the government, when the government hears everything that's been said. We had this inquiry coming up, like for example, we have asked for receiving a passport, provided all the documents, got back from Crimea, they never were able to leave Crimea once again. So half a year of passed, and they would really like to know where the documents are. And the State Migration Services, they say, please do not worry, your documents are being kept, you will be able to get these documents whenever you will be able to come. So after that communication, there's not that many addresses towards us on this issue, and I would like to say the people of Crimea, they hear what is they're being told to, and they're really reacting to some certain initiatives or some certain modifications, and they speak of that as well. The good example, a very good example, I believe, are those numbers, and I have already been listening to our previous speakers as well. So we have our own statistics on the birth and deaths on the temporarily occupied territories. Last year, the number is around 1 1,700 facts of giving birth on the temporarily occupied territories. In 2019, this number is twice as big. It means that the people have no opportunity to receive the service. They cannot register the fact of the birth of their child in Ukraine. Yes, I would like to note that this number is very, very, very small if we were just speaking of 2 million of population in Crimea. So what kind of part of this population that informs about the birth? Well, I can now speak of all of this moment of this period, but you know that throughout the people who are living in the temporarily occupied territories and who have received the certificate of birth of Ukrainian type, this is 13.5% of all of the people, being born in Crimea. Okay, so Olga, we have spoken about vaccination, we have spoken about the tests, we have spoken about the DIA app, and there's a lot of issues about that and questions about that. There was the issue of identification. What do you see? What are challenges? What are the problematic issues of what maybe hasn't been considered? Yes, even if there are some really nice initiatives, but if you do not think about the mechanics of the implementation of those dynamics, there are problems starting. Like, for example, this application DIA, Doma, which is currently called Doma, there is a question of whether you can actually download it in your phone. In Crimea, there is no Ukrainian operators, and there has to be the mechanical change of SIM card at the Ukrainian checkpoint. So you have to get your SIM card back into the phone, then the connection with the mobile internet, and then installing this very specific program. The internet doesn't work properly, and you do not have the access to the internet all the time. And we have been informed as well that, for example, the customer officers, the border officers, on their own risk, they're trying to find their access to the internet just to upload this program. So those are the moments that are being accumulated all the time. The issues of the express testing is a very challenging right now as well, because, for example, the testings have started at Kalanchak checkpoint out of nowhere, very abruptly. We have just identified it. Yeah, we didn't have the fuel. We didn't have the fuel to get the doctors to that. Yes. We've started to identify the situation, and we have understood that there are some certain mechanisms that are being declared, and you have to think of how this mechanism is going to be used and implemented further on. How will you find the money to get the medical workers for this testing? There has to be the separate people who has to be there from the very beginning of the work of the checkpoint until the end, not just the half a day they're available. So those are very nice initiatives, but they need to be updated of how they will be really implemented in that. So we have to identify that we need to have the coordinated actions, because we're developing the mechanism of how this regionally being implemented. That there is a big problem. We cannot explain everything, like we don't have the money for the fuel. As I think you can add up to that this kind of story can hit you dramatically, like when someone came and there's nothing there available, and the person has gone through very... We're speaking about humanity. We're speaking about the objective reasons that are happening. And on the other hand, the person is coming out together with the citizen of Ukraine. And we find in the fuels later on that the people are coming there as well. So, there is the two sides to that. Like, nothing is completed fully, but on the other hand, it's how people get together to resolve those issues. Yes, I wanted to as well to guide us into this direction. So there's something that we can do. Like, we're speaking about the apps, the mobile connection. Do you have some already achievements of what we can do about that? On any ideas how we can do that? Just to say, we cannot identify people for the Ukrainian mobile connection, but it's not there. For 7 years, it's not there already. So in what way the Ministry of Digital Transformation is being based on that? How are we working with that? Understanding that all of the DIA is working with the mobile connection. No, we are speaking that basically our main task is to identify the citizen, and this is the problem that we're currently resolving that, and that is what I say. The mobile ID does not work. We're now currently working on creating the virtual mobile numbers that will be working there, that will be available for the people of the temporarily occupied territories, and that will be the way for us to identify our citizen. We're working on the DIA ID with the push notifications in the e-signature in your phone. You just will need this one visit on the territory under governmental control of Ukraine to receive this e-signature, so you will have all of the range of the services, and you will have the access to all of the digital services and state services provided through the DIA application. So the main thing is to identify the problem and resolution of the problem. So this is the highest priority for us right now. In the framework of the digital transformation of Ukraine, the important principle is so that all of the citizens would have the equal opportunities and equal access to the services. For example, speaking on the lack of the internet to upload the mobile app, it's like a technological solution, yes, but the problem is organizational-wise. You can upload the application before you go to the border. For example, there is the plan of covering the territory of Ukraine with a broadband internet and high-speed internet, and in 3 years, 95% of the controlled territory is going to be covered with that. So the problem is being resolved, and the access to the mobile internet is going to be provided at the checkpoints as well, because the automation and the digitalization of the checkpoints is being held as well in order to simplify and in order to accelerate the process of trespassing of the checkpoints. And I do believe that the people on the temporarily occupied territories, they see the difference, what the trespass has been there. They will not be able to see that because basically for the last year we had a strong decrease in the trespassing of the checkpoints. Yes, I would like to add up to that, because the first thing that has happened when the president has came to his position, so when he got to do the borderline with Crimea, so that was a decree on again restoring the opportunities for the normal trespassing of the checkpoints. So when the checkpoints have been based, that there is a service zone that has been added. So what can we other than layer up the new services to that? And there was a question of the discussion with the Prime Minister Fedorov with the digital transformation. When we had this meeting, we have discussed it and we have talked about why it is important for us to provide the different type of the access to the services, to the online services. Why it is the high priority right now? We're really grateful to the Vice Prime Minister Fedorov that in 2021 the digital services for the people of the temporarily occupied population for Crimea and Donbass and region are among the main priority. And out of the 74 projects that the Ministry of Digital Transformation has presented, there are the project of digitalization, the population of the temporarily occupied territories. There are the issues of the medical services. It's not just about the vaccinations itself. It's also the questions of signing the declarations with the family doctors. That as well can be done through the DIA app. And together with the Ministry of Healthcare and Ministry of Reintegration, we're working on provision of the services. The issue that unfortunately throughout the long period of time for the population who live in the temporarily occupied territories, we didn't have a humane treatment to that and treating them as our citizens. Thank God we have this understanding from the Ministry of Reintegration, from the Ministry of Digital Transformation, that it has to be changed. The other things are the issues of the infrastructure of those actions. And yes, the problems will occur. We understand that, and we're really grateful to the Crimea SOS organization, for the Helsinki Group on Human Rights, who are constantly monitoring those issues and they'll tell us about it. We have discussed this issue for 2 or 3 days ago, like Tamila said, it's okay that you have done it, but there is a problem on Kolanchak. Let us try to resolve that. And it's being done on the constant basis, and we have to continue in doing that all the time. I would like to engage Taras into this case as well, because, you have mentioned that there are some things that the people are addressing you with. You have mentioned about the conversation with one of the family from Crimea, one lady who has been living in Kerch, but has now come to Kiev. She was not, but she lived like in the pension, but because she was not got into the metro station free of charge because she's not the resident of Ukraine. But it's not about the money, it's not about 8 hryvnias that she had to pay, but it's about this treatment as a non-resident of Ukraine. And I really would like to ask Tamila maybe to help me, or Taras, or Inna, to help me with that. What is your mandate in this case? Because there's a lot of things you have to ask from the Ministry of the Reintegration, because there are being basically managing the DOM channel, communication, other things. What is your role right now in this case? Okay, as I have said, that on the central level, on a more centralized level, we're currently building the strategy of informational security that will include the informational reintegration as well, and it also includes all of the issues in informational security. In our program is also the protection of the informational space. There is the state program of protection protecting the informational space. Right now, in our plans, we have a number of events that consider the temporarily occupied territories, providing the audiovisual products, the printed products for that, and again, getting back the platform for learning the Crimean Tatar language. So there are some certain actions, certain measures that are together with us and the Ministry of Reintegration. But of course, all of the activities have been conducted together. You can see that the logos are even here at one of the other ministries, and we have all of the representatives of the ministry. Can I just add up to that? You know, this is a very logical process that is currently being held, because our ministry has been created not for a very long period of time already. And we will have the Vice Prime Minister and the Minister of the Reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories. Right you are, there has to be one centralized executive body that will build the policies in many directions. And the main responsibilities for us, educational process, educational reintegration, this is my favorite topic, speaking after the medical services. That is the cultural component as well. That's those projects that will be under our control and under mandate this year. They will be absolutely synchronized with our colleagues. But right now, we're going to be responsible for creating this platform for the Crimean Tatar language learning. And I do believe that is going to be one of our biggest achievements this year, because we're changing the political approach. We're going to be providing and broadcasting Crimean Tatar language with the Latin letters. So this is going to be a political moment. So they will be able to learn Crimean Tatar language with the help of the online platforms. And there are issues of information security. We have special departments that are dealing specifically of tracking certain strategy and its implementation on the contact line. We understand what are the main broadcasting channels for the occupational government and how we can deal with that. Just to continue the comment of my colleagues, that's quite logical that the Ministry of Reintegration will set out the main policy and is responsible for the implementations of these policies. Yes, I really wanted to speak about education, and I really would like to speak about the remote education as well, but very briefly, because we're speaking on the sources for the access to the audience that is in Crimea. Yes, we're not living in the vacuum situation. There is the situation with the ATR channel that is currently complaining that it doesn't have the state financing, that there was a competition that has been announced, but we had 14 representatives of different channels have been applied for this channel. But there's media that has been watched in Crimea that could have been a tool for people to learn about DIA, about, I don't know, the opportunity to sign the declaration with the doctor, what's going on with the trespassing of the borderlines. So what are you going to answer to us on that? So can you have the direct finances? I get you believe that's your mandate. No, I think that maybe Taras would start with that, because I know that you're not dealing with the informational, basically I'm dealing from... this is the issue that has been delivered to the Ministry of Reintegration. The ATR channel has been financed by the Ministry of Culture and Informational Policy till the end of last year, and all of this budget program has been delegated from this 1st of January, together with the money for the DOM channel, to the Ministry of the Reintegration of the occupied territories. Yes, I just want to say, INA does not deal with media, but with the medicine and education, and you're the professional from media sphere. I cannot recommend the plans for their tenders instead of the other ministries. I don't know their plans. So objectively, this decision that has been made, it was a very thoughtful decision on how this competition should be held. There was mostly the response for the demand and some unreasoned doubt from the competitors from other channels on the direct financial support as well. So I do believe that in order to neutralize any kind of claims or to get the shadow out of this process of financial support, that is why we've had this competition there. And I do believe that the key point here, and I cannot comment the claims that Oleksiy Reznikov has said, but basically what he has said, that the financing the first and the only Crimean Tatar channel, ATR, that has to be there, and that is the issue of the high priority for the state. The issue is in what way this competition is going to be held, or not a competition that will be held, in what way we will provide provide the state support, the ATR channel. That's a different question already. But I do believe that the main manager and administrator of the money is the Minister of the Reintegration, and the Ministry of Reintegration has conducted this communication together with other television channels, and I do hope, and we all hope, that the consensus will be found there, that everyone will get to one round table and everyone will discuss these issues as well. Because for me, the issues of the ITR is very important. I have been to the protest and the support action in 2015 for the ITR channel, when it has been basically displaced from the territory of the occupied peninsula. The Crimean Tatars and the Crimean people, they need and require this channel and this broadcaster. They need to have this opportunity. So it is very important for all of us to, procedure-wise and understanding the state procedures, we need to do that all. I do believe that we have to do it all, and from the other side, from our side, we're going to support this initiative if it's going to be needed. Yes, thank you very much for clarification. I think that will be enough for some people, for some no, maybe. But we have some time to discuss the other needs and the other problems that are rising for the occupied territories. I would like to get to education in details. What are the critical things right now for the participation, and what kind of decisions you would expect from the Ukrainian state as an activist, as a person who has been very connected to what is going on in the other spheres, in the most urgent spheres, what the government can do in that. I will slightly speak of education, if I may, because no one will speak about that in the notions that I know. Because, getting back to these issues, that the decisions cannot be only one-sided. The very good explanations of that, it will be at the education sector. A lot of things have been done. There's a lot of people who'd like to enroll to Ukrainian universities from Crimea. But in 7 years, the Russian Federation has changed the educational program. Crimea, that don't teach Ukrainian language, Ukrainian literature, and Ukrainian history no more. But those are the subjects that are in Ukrainian exams. So people from Crimea who have no practice in that, they had to pass those exams with no additional preparations. What people are telling us, what they do, they hire their additional teachers with their own money. And those are the new challenges that the Ministry of Education has to consider as well. In what way we can engage the biggest numbers of people to the educational space? Maybe there will be the preparatory courses or many other directions, and I believe that maybe my colleagues will add up to that as well. But speaking on other issues, that what has already been mentioned by our previous speakers and in our previous discussions as well, we still have this law on the creating of the free economical zone of Crimea. This legislation has basically regulated and limited the rights of citizens of Ukraine for providing the personal belongings through the administrative borders, and this issue is not resolved by any other legislation. Providing these additional opportunities for the tax paying, and again, I'm speaking about those practices and those questions that we have been resolving. And there has been certain limitations on providing the banking services as well. Yes, last year those limitations have been taken down, but still, for example, last month we have had a lot of addresses and a lot of claims and complaints on the actions of Privatbank and some other banks that basically do not want to provide the services for people of Crimea, and they demand the document as the displaced person. So we have had a claim for the National Bank of Ukraine, and we had a certain response as well. So I know that we're being heard with those limitations that have been existing. So now there is still the issue of improving the access to the administrative services, but not to all of the administrative services. The Crimean people were not going to be using all of the administrative services. They cannot change the registration. so they can, for example, get out of the registration. But there is a big problem with children, for example. The children who have now the right to access to the free of charge education, because basically right now the information on their registered residence is not being included. Yes, it's one hand, it's kind of a nonsense to say that you live in Crimea, but on the other hand, in our country, unfortunately, everything is connected to the registration of the president's place. I know that these are not a very global issues, but those are the issues that are really worrying a lot of people on the everyday basis. I believe that you have the opportunity to respond to that. Have you learned about some issues that are not resolved? Like now, all of the issues that have been voiced out, though, of course, there are the issues for our agenda. Our agenda is including that, so especially for the banks on having the certificate of the displaced persons, and our head has met the head of the National Bank on those issues, because basically, yes, those are the methods that we will not use to our citizens. The issues of education. Last year, as we remember, there were the amendments for the higher education that actually provided the opportunity for all of the people, for all of the alumni from the temporarily occupied territories to enroll to the university without the results of the external evaluation. So we know that from the 7 years of occupation, it means that there is the definite informational edge in most of the cases, but it also has given us the opportunity that the people do not have the access to the educational process of Ukraine. Thus, this year, our ministry is going to be starting the big program that is going to change the approach for the reintegration of the young people from the temporarily occupied territories. That we are going to have the preparatory courses in the framework of the higher education establishment, so that the children will be able to go through the specific training or with the scholarship. And I would like to say that this process has been completed together with the Ministry of Education, but we are the one who owns and administers the money. So our main task that the reintegration word would be filled in with the maximum of senses, not just decoratively. We're speaking about the academical education and the academic researches, academic methods to be provided so that the people will be able to learn Ukrainian language better, which will be the most important issue for them to be studying in Ukraine later, just to increase the cultural integration as well. So speaking of one of our big plans for this year, I do hope that at the end of this year we'll be speaking about the huge number of children who we've managed with the help of our program to reintegrate into our society better. Okay, we're drawing the conclusions of our conversation then, and I think that yes, that's what we had in our previous discussion. I've really asked all the people to speak about very specific plans for the recent months to come, what you would like to do, or maybe some new challenges that you see about that. But I would like to start with maybe with Taras Shevchenko. The issues that you have said that partly it is already the responsibility for the Ministry of Reintegration, but there is the issues that, we have people born here who never been to Crimea. On one hand, that yes, they could have been there, they could have been born after the occupation, or they should have been too little. They will not come and say that I have been to Crimea. Remember, for them it's an old land already, and I have heard this kind of wording already. They don't have this connection no more, and they're being quite violent. So I don't know. I just wanted to have it, just to have it as a main plan for the next months to do. I wouldn't say that if you haven't ever been to Crimea, then it's not your land. Now I know that's not good, but I have read about it. Because for a lot of children, they do not know what it is. It's kind of an occupied territory where the people you don't know live. A lot of people in Ukraine have never left their regions. So in a different place, we have been talking about the identity and who has what kind of identity. And Ukrainians have a very different understanding of identities. Someone believes there are Ukrainians. They believe they are the locals of the local region. Some people believe there are just pensioners and have no other identity rather than that. So there is always question of identity and understanding who you are you Ukrainians? That is one of the topics that the Ministry of Culture and Informational Policy deals with. So yes, that is an important topic of how Ukrainians think about themselves, how they deal with themselves. And Valery Pekar at other panel has mentioned about the informational campaign I Am Ukrainian. As far as I remember, that was the commercial, the social commercial with Mustafa Jamilov. I hope that it was that. And it was signed like I Am Ukrainian, just for us to have a clearer understanding that we all are Ukrainians. And of course, those occupied territories that have to be included, they are included into those notions. Okay, then let me ask you of this specific actions, because for the next months, what are you going to be doing? What do you have to do? Even if it's just one thing. Well, I will say just more than one, because it's a pleasure for me to talk about that. First, of course, we have the e-baby for the temporarily occupied territories. It has to be presented in the recent times. This is something that maybe there will be a month or more or less. But basically, the e-baby has to be presented. Then in the most recent time, we have to launch the providing the application for the displaced person certificate online and the material aid to be distributed as well. We're working on this purpose that will open us a lot of opportunities. This is the remote identification, the DIA ID, so that we will be able to provide the access, wider access for the state services for the people of the occupied territories. And I would like to add a couple of words to education, because the Ministry of Education, together with the Ministry of Digital Transformation, have now launched the project All Ukrainian School Online. So why did we have that? Because people are mostly now in pandemics. So basically, it's really hardened access to education. And of course, we have the course on Ukrainian language, literature, and history. That is as well very good. It is the opportunity for the students, for those who would like to be working and who would like to enroll to Ukrainian university, that will give us the opportunity to get prepared. So there's a lot of work being done, and the dream of us is to create a very simple, easy and humane state, so all of the services will be provided equally to every citizen. Okay, Inna, your plans for the next months to come. Well, the biggest challenge is to present not the concept, but the implementation plan on the reintegration for the young people from the temporarily occupied territories. And you have said already that there is a lot of young people in Ukraine who are not really conscious about what was going on in the eastern part of Ukraine and in Crimea. I'm coming from Donetsk, and my oldest child actually remembers Donetsk, but my youngest son does not remember Donetsk, only on the photos of his grandmother and her garden. But one of the plans, and one of my personal visions of what has to be done further on, that Crimea, Donetsk and Lugansk and temporarily occupied territories, they have to be closer to the west as well. So, the people have to know that Kramatorsk and Svetogorsk are really cool places, that you can relax there, you can go there. So those are the programs that we're going to send for the population from the temporarily occupied territories. We're going to combine them with other children in Ukraine, and the reintegration is double-sided. It cannot just work in one side. It's a mutual process. So I do understand there are many people have never been from Khmelnytsk, they have never been to Cherkasy region, but you know that and Cherkasy region can never stop being the region of Ukraine. So getting back to the main task is for us to understand in what way our step-by-step plan on reintegration the young people is going to be implemented, because the young people are going to be reintegrated in these parts of Ukraine that we're currently mentioning. Olga, what are your main tasks? Not even just your task, but what has to be done like in 2 weeks? For example, if you would have to ring the bell, so you need to make this one small thing, but it's going to be very important for some people. I will not then come up with my time then if answering like that. The first thing that I would say on that, then to start the informational campaign on the enrollment campaign, because we're already too late. We're already too late. We have to speak about that straight away. We have to write about it already. The second thing is about the sustainable sustainable and clear testings for the COVID-19 at the checkpoints, and informing not only those people who are here, but also informing the people who are currently living in the temporarily occupied territories, because right now we are doing that. The civil society is now doing that, but not the state establishments. And the next thing would be is that, it's an important question. I don't want to end up with a sad note, but sometimes we see that, Crimea is like a baggage without a handle. There were some issues that haven't been resolved in the recent time, in the longest time, and now it's been just left over, and we're starting to cope with some other issues on the agenda. So getting back to what I've spoken before, the limitation, the economical limitations, there are still there, and these are the issues for the everyday basis. The issues of restoring your IDs, they are still there. And now, right now, while we still have time, from these bad reasons, because of the limitations of the moment of trespassing at the checkpoints, we have the time to set out those processes. Tamila, the final question to you is a bit of a different, because we have to mention that as well. More than 100 Ukrainian people are the prisoners, political prisoners in Crimea. They're now being held in prisons in Crimea, in the occupied Crimea, and they're being held in prisons in Russia. There have been really bad sentences that have been made throughout the autumn last year. The situation overall is terrible. There was, first of all, the story that a lot of people, the senior population, really, and this is the risk for their life. I do remember it clearly. A year ago, when the pandemic has started, I have been preparing the material on the life on the temporarily occupied territories, and we had the letters from the human rights watchdogs due to the pandemic to set the people free. There was the address from the Secretary General from UN. It was almost a year ago. Next week in Ukraine, we had the first case of COVID, and we're almost in a year of the quarantine already. But so this urgency, where did it go to? And is it this moment when you can now address the international community that we cannot hold people in custody? Maybe that is a bit out of the topic, just to remind that right now, but in the US, for example, the Paul Manafort has been freed out of the prison for 7 years just because of the COVID, and he had very good conditions there. So we have a critical situation. What's going on with those people who have been held in custody in Crimea? Oh, Natalia, the issues is, what about that? That Ukraine has no access to the temporarily occupied territories, and it's not only about Ukraine and solely not in the Ukrainian matters to free the prisoners. It is an urgent question. It hasn't disappeared nowhere. And as far as we know, the negotiation groups are working constantly. The issue is that we do not see the desire from the other side. We do not see the desire from the Russian Federation to free those prisoners. Thus, the Ukrainian state is addressing it at international platforms, mentions the name all the time. In the resolution of the General Assembly of UN, we now have the specific names identified for the political prisoners and the watchdogs who have now been held in captivity on the territory of Russian Federation or in Crimea. We're mentioning the number of people who have been imprisoned by that time. From the side of Ukrainian state, in the framework of the Crimean platform, of course, we're going to raise these issues on human rights, to raise the issues on the political prisoners. The other issue is that for the political prisoners, we have to complete some inside job, because some domestic work, and there's a lot of work that we can do. Together with INNA, we are participating into the cross-disciplinary commission on providing the aid for these prisoners. The Ministry of Reintegration are coordinating this work, and last year, a lot of people have received aid, more than 200 people from Crimea and East. So those are the civil captives or the military hostages, and the people who've been caught as hostages in Russian Federation. Our citizens have received 100,000 hryvnias of every year aid. It is important because we had dozens and dozens and dozens Crimean families of the political prisoners who had nothing to live for because their husbands have been detained in the prisons. They have nothing to feed their children for. They have nothing to pay their bills for. They have nothing to pay their lawyers for. So that is an important work that the state does. There are some moments that haven't been yet fulfilled, but the state is already provides additional attention to that and trying to do that faster in resolving those issues. Thank you very much for these conversations. I do hope that this conversation has been useful for the the people who currently reside at the temporarily occupied territories, and I do hope that they have heard something that they might use further on. They know what to expect, and as you have already said, Olga, they're going to be addressing the hotline, and if they're going to be telling you what's going on, then it would be very good to say that, you told us in a month that you're going to do that in a month. Thank you very much. Tamila Tasheva, the Deputy of the Constant Representative of the President of Ukraine in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, Inna Drahanchuk, the Deputy of Minister on Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories of Ukraine, Olga Kureshko, the lawyer and co-coordinator of the Crimea SOS organization, Gulsana Mamadeyeva, the head of the Directorate of the Ministry of Digital Transformation, and Taras Shevchenko, the Deputy Minister Culture and Informational Policy of Ukraine. My name was Natalia Gumenyuk, and I am a journalist and currently been working here with you for the recent 3 hours in the framework of the TV marathon for the Day of the Resistance Against the Occupation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, the day that we commemorate and honor the courage and the heroism of the people who have been resisting the occupation, who is resisting the occupation of Crimea. Then this TV marathon has been broadcasted by Dom television channel. We have been as well supported by Chornomorska TV and radio company, Ukrainian Pravda radio, and the Promatsky television. And we're really grateful to all of the journalists who have been today with us, who have addressed those challenges and addressed those challenges that we currently have. It's not just the conversation of what has happened 7 years ago. And by the way, we have mentioned today why it is important to remember what has happened in Sevastopol on 26 February 2014, but still, let us hope that there is some new mechanisms for further on development, and the conversation of Crimea will have the real grounds for the further development. It's about people, and it gives us the great chance for the deoccupation and reintegration of Crimea. Thank you for your attention.